which I very much hope the government will consider positively. My lords, the reason I was sent to this House was because of my 19 years' work on family and children's issues. Every day for nearly 2 decades, I stepped through the wreckage of relationships destroyed by one parent poisoning the mind of a child against the other parent. Sometimes the abuser was a man, sometimes a woman. The gender was irrelevant. The horrific irony is that all parties, the abuser, the abused, and the child, end up victims in their different ways. Lives wrecked, the psychological damage beyond measure. For some, the only way out is suicide. The government says that there is no need to include an amendment as this form of abuse is already covered by implication in the bill. But why by implication and not explicitly? In Part 1.4 of the bill, there is already detailed reference to economic abuse, by which one partner or spouse will seek to use money to coerce and control the other. How can economic abuse merit mention when the weaponizing of children for the purpose of coercion and control by one parent over the other goes unmentioned? No one has put it better than the distinguished family court judge, His Honour Stephen Wildblood, QC, and I quote, "The problem with parental alienation is that it's not about the child at all. It is about the adults. It's using children as an instrument of that parent's skewed emotions." I don't know about you, my lords, but in my book, there are few forms of domestic abuse more callous and damaging than that. Are we to draw the conclusion that money matters more than the lives and souls of the victims of domestic abuse, men, women, and children? Surely that cannot be the case. My lord, this has nothing to do with creating a hierarchy of behaviour, as the government fears. It is to ensure that through an act of Parliament, the issue of children as the victims of domestic abuse is not buried under a barrage of gender politics and misinformation. This debate demands to be broadened, not narrowed. There is a crying need for the justice system to be better equipped to distinguish between false and authentic accusations of alienation, between children who fear for good reason not to see one parent, who for good reason do not want to see one parent, and those children who have been indoctrinated to say so. Or, as the noble and learned Baroness Lady Butler Sloss put it in our last debate, a little more time might be spent teaching magistrates, district judges, and circuit judges a little more about it. It is, of course, parental alienation. And there's the rub, the dreaded words, parental alienation. I regret to say that rational debate around this term has made well nigh impossible by the controversy and emotion which it attracts. That is why my amendment, instead of using the term, in effect describes what my supporters and I mean by it. That is, a parent's behavior deliberately designed to damage the relationship between a child of the parent and the other parent. Seen in that light, I cannot believe that any reasonable person can object to our amendment. Of course, I have every sympathy for women who fear that men will use parental alienation as a defense against well-founded claims of abuse. The last thing I want to do is to make life easier for an abusive and dishonest man. To the contrary, I believe that the effect of our amendment, far from disarming women victims, will strengthen their defense. But, my lords, it is plain wrong to assert that so-called parental alienation is a stratagem used exclusively by men against women. An example, Judge Wildblood was reported as saying in 2019, in an alienation case, the children would suffer, and I quote, significant and long-term emotional damage, adding that, and I quote again, the cause of that harm lies squarely with this mother. Alienation exists. To deny it would be to deny that the earth is round. More to the point, you have all seen the petition signed within matter of weeks by over 1,400 fathers, mothers, and grandparents, begging the government to hear their voices and include a reference to this vile form of abuse in the bill. I receive emails constantly, every day, asking for that. And that, if not persuasive enough, I have an abundance of proof in hundreds of peer-reviewed research papers and scholarly articles to be found in the written evidence which I have circulated. This body of work comprehensively refutes the so-called expert advice submitted to the Ministry of Justice. Advice which says, on one hand, that there is no such thing as parental alienation, and that it benefits men only. This is a bill which, if it becomes law, will deeply determine the well-being and mental health of families across the land for years to come. It is therefore vitally important that we have complete clarity about its intents and its reach. Can my noble friend, the Minister, agree that the family courts would benefit enormously from having parental alienation defined in law? Can the Minister further agree that the use of children as a weapon in adult conflicts is a form of child abuse, and that this is a matter which should fly above all politics and issues of gender, since it equally affects men and women and their children and their wider family? And lastly, can my Minister confirm that parental alienation will remain in the final version of the guidance of the bill, and that Kafka's, that is to say the experts and not the ideologues, will play a central role in advising the committee that will examine the guidance? I beg to move.
Amendment proposed, page 2, line 12 at the end. In